You need to understand the difference between the northern and southern British colonies in North America. The northern colonies were founded for religious freedom, whereas the southern ones were founded for economic gain. Let's talk about the southern ones first. You need to know about the year 1607 when Jamestown is founded. Jamestown would be home to the Virginia Company of London, where they would plant tobacco in the Chesapeake Bay area, which is between Maryland and Virginia. Tobacco became a very important export for back in Britain. Remember though, cotton is not being farmed at this time extensively. That's going to come later. As far as the workers are concerned, you have indentured servants. They came over from England. These were poor people down on their luck who needed a ride over to the New World. In exchange, they put in roughly 7 years of labor on the plantations of tobacco. Once their contracts are up, you're going to see an influx of slavery. In 1619, you have the first slave ships coming over to the New World. But not all was well in Jamestown at this time. In 1676, you're going to have Bacon's Rebellion, led by Nathaniel Bacon. This rebellion led to the burning of Jamestown. It was caused by three major things. One, anti-government sentiment against Governor Berkeley. Second, you're going to have racial undertones, as there was animosity with Native Americans. And last, there's a gap between the rich and the poor. All of these examples of conflict we're going to see throughout the entire course of American history. Regarding the northern colonies, you need to know the difference between the Puritans and the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims are separatists. That means they separate from the Church of England. The Puritans don't separate, they're non-separatists, but they want to purify the Catholic influences of the church because they are Protestants. Remember, coming over to the north, the Puritans are Protestant. Catholics will go closer to Baltimore in Maryland. We'll talk about them in a little bit. As for the north, we know that the Puritans are not tolerant and religion is a big part of everyday life. Just look at the 1692 Salem witch trials where many people were killed because they were accused of witchcraft. The Pilgrims settle in Plymouth, whereas the Puritans go to Massachusetts Bay. The governor, John Winthrop, establishes a city upon a hill, which is a moral example, as well as the big hill would be someplace that they could be closer to God. Around that area is where you're going to see eventually Boston founded. Challenging church authority can get you in trouble. Anne Hutchinson was a woman who lived at this time, and she was banished from the colony for going against what the clergy was teaching. She believed that they were interpreting the Bible and religion wrong. Remember, these Puritans believe in Calvinism. That means predestination. She didn't think that the clergy were following the rules correctly. Eventually, she winds up in Rhode Island, and then she gets killed in a Native American raid in New York. Regarding conflicts with Native Americans, you should know about the Pequot War, where the colonists teamed up with some Native American tribes to help remove the Pequots. In addition, you should know about Metacom or King Philip's War. That's when the colonists fought against Metacom. Although they defeated him, it led to the destruction of several towns as well as a destroyed economy. Certainly we know that conflicts between settlers and Native Americans will go on for over a century. There are three types of religious freedom that you need to know about in the colonies. In the South, in Maryland, you need to know about the Maryland Act of Toleration. That brought freedom to all Christians. That meant Catholics and Protestants would not be persecuted against. In Pennsylvania, you have the Holy Experiment of William Penn. That meant that there would be no established church for any particular religion. And in Rhode Island, you have Roger Williams establishing separation of church and state and religious freedom. A large religious movement that you need to know about is the Great Awakening. Led by George Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards, this movement tried to eliminate sin, and it brought emotion with new lights into religion. Even though religion was spreading, there were still many deists at this time. They believed that God had created the world, but then allowed natural forces to take over. There are many examples of democracy that you should know about during the colonial period. For example, the Mayflower Compact. When the Pilgrims came over on the Mayflower, they said they would have a form of direct democracy. In Virginia, you have the House of Burgesses, which would be a democratic republic where people would elect their officials. Of course, that will inspire eventually the House of Representatives. In Connecticut, you have the first constitution. It's known as the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. Also, in New York, you have the establishment of freedom of the press, with the Zenger trial. But what about economics? Mercantilism became the economic system. Mercantilism exists where you have a mother country such as England, and they are taking all the raw materials out of the colonies, turning them into finished goods, and then reselling them to the colonies. It's all about benefiting the mother country, whether it's England, Spain, or France. But England would sometimes look the other way because they were making a lot of money. This idea is called salutary neglect. Sure, in America, they could have the House of Burgesses. They could have the Great Awakening. England doesn't really care so much. They care about the bottom line financially. Salutary neglect is going to be the economic way that Britain is going to treat the colonies until after the French and Indian War. As for the French and Indian War, that is when the French, with their fur trade, they are going to align with Native Americans and battle Britain. Britain is going to be supported by the colonists. So remember, at this time, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, they're all British. They are loyal to the crown. It's not going to be until much later that they are going to want independence. Regarding Benjamin Franklin, you should know about the Albany Plan of Union, where Franklin designed a very famous cartoon. It was a snake, and it was entitled Join or Die. It showed the snake cut into different sections, proving the fact that if the colonies didn't unite, they would certainly get destroyed in the French and Indian War. But Britain would wind up winning the French and Indian War, salutary neglect would end, and the colonies would begin to get taxed to pay for the British Army. All of this is going to lead to the causes of the American Revolution. No discussion about the American colonies would be complete without talking about the differences in the geography. The northern colonies, such as Massachusetts and Connecticut, were known for their fishing as well as their shipbuilding. There was agriculture there, however, with rocky soil and a cold climate, you wouldn't have as much as you would see in the South. The middle colonies, such as New York and Pennsylvania, were known for shipbuilding and trade. And of course, the southern colonies, with their warmer climate, would have more agriculture. In Virginia, you'll have tobacco. And in North Carolina, you'll see tobacco as well as the fur trade. In South Carolina, you'll see rice, and in Georgia, it'll be rice and indigo. Of course, at this time, you're going to see a massive influx in the amount of slave trade that is going over to the southern colonies, and they are going to work those fields. We're not going to see the end of slavery until after the American Civil War.